Meet your new go-to for a fresh and inclusive approach to health.
Wellness Rebranded is the pod where a dietitian, a personal trainer, and a mental health therapist combine perspectives to help you redesign your relationship with food, fitness, and your feelings.
Whether we're serving up juicy stories, breaking down the latest research, or dropping practical tips, we'll leave you informed, inspired, and ready to take health-promoting action.
We get you because we are you.
We've joined forces because we know that health isn't one-dimensional, and neither are you.
Tune in for real talk that cuts through the wellness and diet culture hype. Stay for the laughs, the insights, and the feel-good vibes.
Hi there, and we are here again with you on another episode of Wellness Rebranded with a very special guest. Her name is Marie Burgess. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor and a grief therapist here in Annapolis, Maryland, where we are. She helps parents grieve the loss of a child. And what an important topic that we really wanted to bring to our podcast. We believe is a topic that we don't talk enough about. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that that is not there, that there are many parents grieving out there. So how lucky we feel that Marie agreed to talk today with us about this topic. So we're going to talk about grieving the loss of a child for parents out there that are going through this, have gone through this, and maybe, God forbid, will go through something similar to bring tools, insights, and just raw human conversation. Marie, thank you so much for accepting this invitation and being here with us today. Please tell our listeners a little more about yourself. What do you do, and how did you come to do this kind of work?
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here and to meet all of these wonderful leading ladies from my area. So for those listeners that don't know, there's a community of women entrepreneurs in here in Annapolis, Maryland, that have just been welcoming and supportive and exactly what the world needs more of.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be here. And
Welcome.
thank you. One of the things that I have evolved into learning about myself is that I like to share my spirit with others. And sometimes my spirit can be a lot. So you will probably see that as we're talking today. But I have a lot to share because I feel like sharing is what facilitates the connection. And being vulnerable makes it easy for and if I'm vulnerable, it makes it easier for other people to be vulnerable. And so I've always been a helper. I always knew I wanted to help people. I didn't know how I wanted to help people. I had that grad school, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? When I graduate and join this world. And I remembered somebody who made an impact on my life was my school counselor in high school, and Jane Frew, love her. And she helped guide my spirit into helping other people through counseling. And that's how I started. I started my journey as a school counselor in a high school. And I worked in a suburban county down here in Southern Maryland, in the town that I grew up in, so that I could give back to my community. And then my life changed. I had my first child, which anybody who has a child is like, oh, no kidding. Your life changed? You had a child. Duh, right? Of course it did. And but not a but. And there was another layer to it that has really shaped me into who I am now. I had a child who, before he was even born, was a fighter. And when he was born, he fought every day. And every day I was faced with life and death every single day for Harvey. And that changes a person in a way that is biological, down to my cells in my body have been changed from my experience being his mom. And not only has it changed just like my day to day, listeners can't see this, but I have a tattoo on my arm that says enjoy the little things because he taught me that because I did not know how long we would have him. So every day was like the carpe diem because YOLO, we were YOLOing every day because we didn't know how many we would have. And that shaped me even further. And, the listeners heard your introduction. We're talking about child loss. And anytime you meet someone that has like a really interesting specialty, I don't know about you guys, but I go, ooh, what happened in their life where they landed in this place? Harvey died in 2015 when he was 4 years old. And just this past week was his angelversary. So it was 9 years ago. And when we were going through this journey of his life, we were grieving every step of the way, every step of the way. And I used to say to people that would listen, that I was sharing my spirit with, that I felt uniquely prepared to be his mom because of things that were interesting to me, things that like, what teenager do you know that is interested in like the differences culturally of death and dying? Like what? Me. It was me. So I had a special interest in all the things that prepared me to be his mom. So I don't know what people's beliefs are, but I call that some sort of divine intervention there.
Mm.
And when he died, he was on pediatric hospice, which is another thing that most people are. I did not even know that there was such a thing as pediatric hospice. Surprise, there is. And it has pros and cons, just like anything else. But what hospice demonstrated to me was a level of care that I didn't know I needed. I didn't know. I didn't know how helpful something like hospice could be. And I thought to myself, whenever I'm ready, because I don't know what the timeline is going to look like for my grief, right? I want to help people the way that they helped me.
Right.
So what that meant, you guys are going to be like, wow, women really do like rule this world. We can do so many things. After Harvey died, I went back to school and I was a million months pregnant with my third and final baby when I finished my first class for my clinical licensure so that I could become a therapist, so that I could help people like me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing about your experience, Marie. And I'm so sorry. This is one of those things that we go in life without planning it, of course. And then so many things we can learn from these experiences that then we take to help other people like you did. And it's like we were saying at the beginning, you were saying about showing vulnerable, how important that is sometimes for connection. Because when we don't share about our experiences, that's when we feel isolated sometimes in things that we share, experiences that we share with other people. I always say that I dream with a world where we, talk more about our emotions and the things that we struggle with and the accomplishments that we have. And because then it's an easier way to connect. And then we can talk about each other. We can support each other really in a way that we wouldn't know if we just don't share our experiences. What was you and I talked when we met about something very important related to what I just said, which is support. And you mentioned that in a moment like that, finding other people that either went through a similar experience or were going through a similar experience was life changing for you. Tell me a little bit more about that. Where did you find that and what did that do to you, finding the right support?
Oh, wow. This is where I made the turn. I really do believe that the support that I sought, I sought it. So, I had a role there, right? But the support also had to be available, right? There had to be something. There was a support group offered by Hospice of the Chesapeake for parents of child loss. And it was for all types of loss, right? So, and throughout the person's life. So when I joined this group that was recommended to me as a support after Harvey died through hospice, not only was it easy to access, it was in person, it was no charge, there was no fee for over a year so that I could get support. And then we met consistently every month. So I am not kidding when I say every month for 2 years, my husband and I went on a Saturday morning. It was the saddest version of like a date night, that you could, like, our parents would and have our two, because, well, we had one baby at the time, but I was pregnant again later on. Anyway, they would come, I'd take my littlest out to breakfast, and we would go and get grief support. And I would go there and ask the questions that I didn't think, who else could I ask other than I literally asked parents because I didn't know how to answer this. And you guys know this is a social norm in our culture. How do I answer the question of how many kids I have? How do I answer that question? Because that comes up a lot. You look like a person who could have a child. Let me ask about that. And so all of a sudden, I'm 29 years old and I am like, how do I answer this? And I found all different types of responses from those parents. I learned from them how this could evolve. When my grief evolved, my answers would evolve. Anyway, I landed in a place where I felt safe to ask questions that were really hard to ask.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Marie, there are many thoughts that come to mind. I'm sorry, Elizabeth and Tara, I'm taking over. But
Cool for you.
this episode hits a special spot for me, and I'll tell you many reasons why. But going back, what I was going to say, and whatever that response you found is unique for you, because we've talked in this podcast before, one episode previously that we talked about grief and how it's different for every person, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve, even if the experiences are very similar, right? I think I've ever shared in this episode before, but I had my first daughter, who's 14 years old now, and then I got pregnant with my boy, Eric, and everything was going well during pregnancy. But then when he was born, I gave birth to him, and about 45 minutes later, while I was holding him in my arms, he passed. And it was probably, I'm 47 years old. My father passed away. I left my country. I've gone through a lot of grief, but that one hit in a place that it's a place in your body that you don't even know can hurt. So, going to your point, when that happened to us, I went to the same place you mentioned, and it was a lifesaver to find a group of moms where, with different experiences, all the loss of a child, but different experiences. And it was what I needed. It was the support I had to have. And two things I want to say about that. One, because when we experience things that maybe are not that talked about, or maybe even not that common, the hardest part for me was among my friends, to find people who knew how to support me, because I became the I know it's not like that, and they didn't mean to. I'm just talking from my end, how I felt. I was like the weird lady who just lost a baby and came home still, breastfeeding because your breasts don't know. So you come home full of milk and having to breastfeed something that a person that you don't have. I became like this person that my friends didn't know how to talk to because they felt it was so hard what I was going through, and they validated that, but it's hard to know what to say. I remember I had like a couple of friends that were pregnant at the same time, and they did have their babies, and they stopped any contact with me because it was like, wow, how do I even share with Maria that my baby was born and I'm happy about it? And that felt even worse because, again, I was isolated by myself. I mean, I isolated myself because it was a tough experience, but then other people without wanting isolated me because I'm like this grieving walking human that we don't know how to even talk to, right? And the
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to say, you mentioned you went with your husband. In my case, I went with by myself because I also had to learn that my husband needed to grieve in a different way. For him sitting down with a group of parents talking over and over about this thing was not what he wanted to do, he grieved on and it was hard for me to realize that I also needed to respect that even if we were both going through the same experience, right?
I agree with that. Mine went with me because I wanted him to go with me, but he was not an excited, eager participant in any way. He was just like my silent partner. And then after, we would have our own time, like, because my
Mhm.
parents would stay here and we would go to lunch and do a little decompressing or something and then talk about it. But
Mhm.
yeah, mine did had his own separate grief journey, but I needed him to be a part of mine.
Yeah.
And so he went with me. But I hear that a lot. Like I'm running a group right now, and it's all moms who are grieving child loss.
And
And
that's okay.
it is, and they're
Yeah.
trying to get their partners to come, but it's just a different need. So we'll see how it evolves. But yeah, the same group. I love that. We went to the same group and we both found life-changing support. And I'm
Mhm.
sure it was like how far apart were we? I don't know, like a long time. Harvey was
Yeah.
born in 2011. So
And this, I mean, I think that this should probably be the title of this episode is the power of sharing our experiences, our stories, our truth. If it's not about grief, it could be about divorce, it could be about body image, struggling with body image. How helpful can be to share and connect with each other that way, because not only you can learn from other people, like your questions that you were able to ask about, do I say I have how many kids, some in earth, some in heaven, like what do I do, and
right.
then find the answer that works best for you.
Mhm,
Same with any other topic, the power of sharing.
mhm,
And yet it's something that's so hard.
Mhm.
Why do we have trouble sharing?
I think,
well,
I mean, I
So
think
vulnerable.
well, because for some people I've found, and this is just my opinion as a human, as a therapist, some people believe that the more they share, the more it's going to hurt because you have to visit that emotion every time you share. However, some studies and other people might argue and say, the more you share it, the lesser it becomes. But again, it depends on each person. It's different for everyone. I probably another reason is that it's hard to find people to share it with. I mean, this might be controversial, but I know there are amazing people out there that want to support. But and and that's why I have my listening workshop, just to help other people on how to really show empathetic and supportive listening. Because you know how many things I heard when I went through my experience with my baby. Oh, well, God only sends that to people who can handle it. I'm like, okay, can you call God and let him know I cannot handle it just in case he wants to send me something else? I don't, Then I
Oh
wanna
yeah.
I wanna be very weak. I want God to think that I cannot.
Or the follow-up to that one, which is, you know, they're not here with you, but they're in a better place. I'm sorry.
Or
I'm sorry. Say what now? How is a child not being with their mother
yes.
in a better I no. I disagree.
Or
Yeah.
things happen for a reason, and all that came from a good place. Hey, it most like 90% of the times come from a good place. People, just don't know what to say, and that's okay. I get it. So maybe that's another reason, Elizabeth, is like, who am I sharing this with? That maybe they don't judge it, or they don't dismiss it, or they don't minimize it, or they don't preach me about it like, okay, you'll be fine. Everything will be fine. Yeah, I know, but right now I'm not.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, I
that's
think also two things that came up for me when you were saying that is one, what Tara said, it can be really vulnerable to share, and you're opening yourself up to people's judgments and opinions. And then also maybe people don't want to share for fear of the isolation that you were talking about a minute ago. If people know they're going to treat me differently, and that doesn't necessarily feel good. But I really am, sadly, I've known a few people in my life who have lost children, and it is a very difficult thing. You want to be there to support people through it, and your friends and the people that you love, but you are really afraid to say the wrong thing, or you don't really know how to hold space for that. So I would love to hear your tips on that, Marie, sorry.
There's but Marie and Maria here, so both
Well,
therapists.
true. Actually, you're right. But I was trying to talk to you. Tips on that for people who want to be there supporting someone who's going through this. I mean, perhaps one of the most tragic things a person can experience. How do you suggest supporting them?
And Marie, hold on. Before you answer that, I'm sorry. I want to make sure that our listeners know that we also want to cover, when we say the loss of a child, we also want to cover the loss of pregnancy. Because how many times is like, oh, I lost a child. And then if you say, if the person asks, oh, during pregnancy, how far in the pregnancy were you? Oh, I was 8 weeks. And people's like, oh, like it's like, it was just 8 weeks. We don't judge grief. This is a conversation about losing a child, even if you were 2 days pregnant, if that's even possible. If you would know that you're 2 days pregnant, but is losing the child, the idea that you were gonna be a mother, the plans, the excitement of what it could be, what it would have been, what all of that. So just wanna be sure, because that's also a little, part of this that we don't talk enough about, or we many times dismiss, is early pregnancy loss. And we're not here to do that. Grief is grief. So Marie,
Marie,
yes.
before you answer Elizabeth's question, let me just share. So I was, hopefully you can remember her question.
A good question.
How people can support people who are grieving. Got
Yes,
it.
we'll get to that in a second.
So I had a miscarriage when I was 11 weeks pregnant, but I had a different experience where I didn't know I was pregnant. And I know you're probably thinking like 11 weeks, how did you not know? But because I have polycystic ovaries, like I had been bleeding for like 2 years, and my doctor was just kind of like, well, welcome to having polycystic ovaries. And, then one day it was just like not the normal kind of blood. And I was like, oh, what's this? And so I reached out to my friends and I said, hey, have you guys ever had a period like this? And they were all like, no. And so it's a crazy story, but it was actually because of my dog that I discovered that I was pregnant, because for the last 11 weeks, she had been going into my dirty clothes and finding my undies and pants and like, this is so gross, TMI guys, but like licking them until they were soaking wet. And
Like the
so,
hormones that,
yeah,
you could sense.
I
Yeah.
can smell it. Yeah.
Yeah.
so she could smell the pregnancy, and I had no idea. And I got super mad at her, like while I was miscarrying, because I walked into my bedroom and stepped on a soggy pair of undies, and I was like, "God damn it, Chula! What is going on?" And of course, I was all hormonal and ragey. And I pulled out my phone and I Googled, like, why is my dog licking my undies? And the first thing that comes up is they now recognize that you're pregnant and you're the weakest member of the pack. So they're trying to hide your scent from predators. And so knowing that, I was like, oh, I can't be mad, but also I'm not pregnant. And then I was like, well, maybe that's what this is. So, like, I ended up going to the doctor a few days later, and they were like, yeah, you were, congratulations, but you're not anymore. And so I told my friends, and I was kind of like, damn, guys, I just had a miscarriage. Like, and they were kind of like, are you good? And I was like, I mean, like, I didn't know I was pregnant, right? So I didn't have like all the expectations and the dreams for the future and the name and the, all everything that goes with being pregnant picked out. So I readily admit that this was a much easier situation for me than it is for many, many, many people. Because for me, it was like hopes and dreams were shattered after they were already shattered. Like I didn't know that I had, but my friends did kind of like have no idea how to support me through that time. And like even me as the person, like I didn't know what I needed. So I think it's super valuable to have this question that Elizabeth asked answered. Like, how do we show up for people? How do we support them through this? Because all of us want to support, I think, but none of us have any idea what to do.
Well, I mean, y'all are hitting on something that, as an educator at heart, right? I worked in a high school, right? I wanted to help teach people about feelings. Teenagers, I wanted to voluntarily teach teenagers how to live their best life emotionally, right? Among other things. And so when I approach a grief journey with someone, I am thinking, how can we put your grief and your journey front and center so that it can be what you need it to be, not what society says it should be, or not what your preconceived notions of grief are, what it needs to be for you. And so, to answer the question, how can you support someone who is grieving or on a grief journey? Well, I want to reiterate that grief is a universal concept that we all experience. Okay. Grief is very individualized, as we've talked about already. What I need to support my grief is going to be different than every person around me's needs. And so that's what makes it hard to answer the question, what can I do to support someone? Because everyone's needs are going to be different. But there are a couple of things that are like surefire winners, no matter what the situation is. So, for example, I, as the grieving person, was able to educate my support group on what these things were because I had had this decades of like special interest in this kind of thing. I like to go against social norms, etc. So let's go with now I have like a million thoughts running into my head at the same time. So one of the things that I requested, but that my friends followed up and did, okay, was the occasional check-in. Okay. And now Maria, because she's doing a workshop on how to listen, knows that an occasional check-in can backfire, right? Because people can be like, "Oh, how are you?" And they start asking you a million questions. And then now it's not turned into a check-in of support. Now it's turned into something where the griever feels compelled to answer or, all this kind of stuff, make a plan. So what I like to tell people is check in a non-committal, declarative way that doesn't require a response from the griever. So what does that look like? That looks like a text message that says, "I saw a beautiful butterfly today, and it made me think of you. I love you. Period. Send." nothing that I have to do as the recipient other than like a quiet, like, thank you, right? Like an acknowledgement that someone else is supporting me without me having to make them feel better or make them feel comfortable. So that's one thing, is sending a message, whether it's a text, an email, a letter, a care package even, that you do not expect a response from.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one. That's one.
And I'm going to add, so yes to that. So I do believe if you out there know of somebody that you think might need some support and you're doubting to reach out, my answer to you is reach out.
Yep.
Because silence is can hurt. Reach out with a text message just saying that I'm thinking of you, I love you. If it's not somebody that you say I love you, I'm thinking of you, I'm here if you need anything, right? But I also want to add, Elizabeth, you said something when you asked the question. It's like, I don't know what to say. That's okay to say too. Let's say you're going through something and I can say, Elizabeth, I don't know what to say and I'm afraid to say the wrong thing, but I want you to know I'm here and I care about what you're going through. So I will give you listeners things because I actually very straightforward with this. These are things that most likely will never fail. And the simple, I'm so sorry. This is happening. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry you're hurting. Okay. Sometimes it's just, I'm so sorry, period. A heartfelt, I'm so sorry is a good thing to say. But compared to not say anything, right? Other things that we can say is, like you said, I don't know exactly what you're going through. I can imagine how this is for you. My heart breaks with yours is something that was told to me many times, and my heart breaks with yours. What I just said, I care about what you're going through. If there's anything that you can think of that I can support with, let me know. The difference with all these statements and what I don't recommend to do is that we're not fixing, because we're fixers by nature. So we want to fix the other person's, pain. And when we try to fix, it's things like, oh, you'll be fine, you'll feel better soon, or you have other babies, or you get pregnant again, or, it comes from a good place, but we're trying to fix. And we don't need to fix it. Emotions are okay to be felt, and they're okay to give the space to honor them and to let them be. Just let them be. Let them flow like water without having to be fixed. So no fixing. The other thing we don't want to do is preaching. Many people, you go through this and they feel better and you can do this or that, which is also fixing, but the preaching or the comparing. Oh, that happened to me too. I lost a kid or I lost a pregnancy, and this is how I did it. Your experience is valid too, but at that moment, the spotlight is on the person who is experiencing right there and there. And that's the support you want to give. Yes, Elizabeth.
So what I hear you saying then is, I think a lot of times, most likely from a place of well-intention or just discomfort, people maybe want to move past it, sort of.
Right.
And what you're sharing is all tips to hold space, essentially.
Yes. And
And that's
Go ahead.
that's where I was going with like my second tip is, not to avoid talking about the deceased or their experience with them. And I mean, Maria knows this as a licensed therapist, right? We work with people in our culture, and maybe in your, right? Across the world, any intense or difficult emotion tends to be avoided. And, that's biological, right? There is a purpose for that. And doesn't support healing. Avoidance of emotion does not support healing. And
Like the
the
mic drop moment.
mic drop, I'll say it again. Emotional avoidance does not support healing. And that is no more clear than it is with grief. Because all of us can think of a person in our lives who got stuck in their grief, whether it was because of isolation or guilt or all of the emotions, or they were just unsupported, or their grief was not witnessed appropriately and they got stuck and they were forever different in a way that you don't recognize them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So my second tip to listeners on how to support a grieving individual, no matter their grief, is to honor their loved one with them.
Mm-hmm.
Honoring a loved one, even if the griever doesn't know you're doing it, right? If you're like silently saying a prayer or you're thinking of that person, you don't even have to tell the griever that, but boy, would they love to hear it. Because when people tell me, oh, I saw something that reminded me of Harvey today. And I am just like, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for letting me know I'm not the only one that is still thinking of him and that his spirit is still with us. That, I mean, and then we talk about connection. We talk about, one of the things that I love to say is I experience this often. I am in awe of the healing power of human connection. The healing power of connection is what we receive when someone is witnessing and honoring our grief. So when they're witnessing our grief and allowing us to cry and allowing us to be ourselves in front of them without fixing us, like, powerful. And then honoring our loved one too, like, it's not weird. We have some sort of perverse, like cultural belief that once someone has passed on, especially a child, it's like we don't know what to do anymore. And it's like with early pregnancies or miscarriages, even, people are just like, oh, that's disenfranchised grief. That's a grief that we don't really recognize as a culture. And that is really not the vibe. Not the vibe. Because as soon as you have a future that is evolving within you and then outside of you when the baby is born, that is shattered if they die. And it doesn't matter if you're in your pregnancy early, you still are developing all of these thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about what your future is going to be. If your child was an adult when they died, now that doesn't stop as a parent. You don't stop dreaming about your children's lives just because they're adults. So if it doesn't matter what time in a person's life their child dies, being a parent of child loss is a club that none of us wanted to be a part of. But here we are, just trying to figure out how to live life without our loved one. And it is a upward challenge.
Yeah, I love the way that you phrased it when you said, thank you for letting me know that you're honoring them too, that you're thinking about them too. Like, I don't know, that just like deeply resonated with me. Because I know when I've experienced grief in my own life, it is very isolating. And you feel like you're in this place of turmoil and everyone else has just moved on. And just that simple statement can be so therapeutic.
Yeah.
Okay, so tapping into what you just said about moving on. So there is, there's data and research about the types of support after grief and like the timelines in which the support can fall off, right? So we think right after an event, a life-changing event, as our insurance would call a life-changing circumstance, right? Oh, now you can enroll in your insurance because you've had a life-changing event. Blah. Anyway, you have this life-changing event and you're flooded with support, right? Your flowers and cards and meal train and, all this kind of stuff, right? But what happens? What happens? How long is it, do you guys think, that sort of support lasts.
That's the thing. Sometimes it's short-lived, right? And then all at the same time, right after the experience, and then months go by and you find yourself crickets, right? Because everybody showed that support at the beginning. That's what I said, is just sprinkle it. If we could be, talk to each other and say, you do the meal train, then in a month I'll do something else. So we sprinkle that support.
That's the third thing. That's the is come in like consistently. So the data shows that grief support tends to wane down 3 months after the loss.
Yeah.
So 3 months after the loss is when I go in. When everybody else is pulled back, that's when I go in and show up for the
Or go
person.
in again. It could be that you were at the beginning.
Go in
and
again.
come back.
Exactly.
And then, yes.
Exactly. So sprinkling your support, even if that means you send a text message a month or something like that, means so much, because you know what? Parents who are on a grief journey are on this journey for life, and they need your support well after they've experienced the loss.
Yeah.
Well,
Marie,
powerful.
thank you so much. I mean, what a great and needed conversation. And I appreciate you coming with us today to talk about this. A few takeaways. Grieving is part of life, right? And we can be of support to each other. We shared today a few tips of how to do that. I think it's another takeaway is the power of sharing, the healing power that connection can have. And then again, like you said it more than once, emotional avoidance does not support healing. So let's talk more about the emotions. Open those conversations. Share yours as a way to start the conversation for, a society and a group of people that talk about emotions. If you are interested in my listening workshops, that's on November 9th, locally here in Annapolis. It's called How to Practice Empathetic Listening to Deepen Your Relationships and Support Other People. So that's at 9 a.m. That's a Saturday. And you can find out more on the coachingtherapist.com/events. To know more about Marie, on the show notes, we're going to have her links to connect with her. If you have any questions for her, any comments, and of course, if you like this episode, please download, share. If you have another way to connect with us is through our Instagram, Wellness Rebranded. We love hearing from you. Marie, thank you again. And until next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and love with us.
Bye.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you want to connect with me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Instagram at coaching_therapist.
I'm Elizabeth. You can find me at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition or in my Facebook group, Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tara DeLeon Fitness. Guys, if you loved this episode or any of our other episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really, really helps us get the non-diet word out to the rest of the world. So please leave us a review.
Yes, thank you.